A small mistake in payroll might look like a typo, but in trucking, it can cost you thousands or even drivers. Payroll errors aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, they ripple into trust, compliance, and cash flow. Today, I'll break down some of the hidden costs of payroll errors, the ones that most fleets don't think about, and how to avoid them. Welcome to Driven for Success, the podcast to help small trucking companies run their back office better. Before we dive in, let's take a look at the September Driver Pay Index. For those of you who don't know, every month we publish the Driver Pay Index, which is just the average a driver makes from all of our clients in that month in a paycheck. Uh, it we've done it for over a year, but we started the data back in 2020 before COVID to get an idea. And what we did was we set January 2020 that month as 100. So everything else is like a percentage of that. So let's get into the numbers. In September, the driver pay index was 132.16. That means you're paying 32%. Sorry, that means the driver is making 32% more than they made in January of 2020. Now, January 2020 was a low time, so remember that. And also, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily paying more per hour or more per driver or per mile or whatever. It means it could be that the drivers are running more miles. We just go off total pay because that's the data we get from everybody. Some clients don't give us miles. Otherwise, I'd give you mileage with it. And I just wouldn't be a good enough sample of just miles. So some companies pay percentage. Some companies they just tell us pay them this much money. So we don't always know. But yeah, 132.16, which is very consistent with May, June, and July. August was a spike. It always goes up in August, is what we've learned. I think that the lack of a holiday, everything just kind of keeps rolling. There's no broken up weeks like there was with the 4th of July or Memorial Day that leaks into June or Labor Day in September, things like that. August was 149.07, which is the highest we've ever seen for a month. But all the other months are right around 132, 133, 134. It's been holding steady. Just as a framework, last September was 121.39. The September before that was 126.98. So it is up a little bit, but it's not up a lot. And again, that could be drivers driving more miles. It doesn't necessarily mean people are paying the drivers more because we're not seeing that in the rates just anecdotally. We have all this on our website, truckingpayroll.com/DPI for driver pay index. You can access it anytime. There's a grid right there. We think it's helpful to kind of give you an idea of what the market's doing. If a driver comes to you and says, hey, I want to work for you, but I need to make some crazy number, you can say, look, the market doesn't bear that. I've got data to support what I'm paying you. Just keep that in mind. We hope it's helpful. It's certainly, to me, it's interesting to see what happens with it compared to rates and things like that. So that brings us to today's topic, since we're talking about driver pay. And it's even the small errors can cost you more than you think. Now, to start with, there's two kinds of errors, really. There's overpaying and there's underpaying, right? That's really the things that you're going to get wrong. So we mostly talk about underpaying a driver, but let's just talk very quickly about overpaying a driver, because it's something 20 odd years ago that when I worked for a trucking company, we had issues with a payroll software that overpaid our drivers. And so we had to go get it back. Once we found it, fortunately, all for us, all the drivers still worked there and it wasn't a crazy amount of money. So we could claw it back from them. But it can be hard, especially if it's an error that's been going on for a long time and some of those drivers have left. You're never getting that money back. You can send them any legal notice you want. You're not getting that money back from those guys. And from the other ones, if it's a significant amount of money, that's going to be tricky too, because they're going to feel like not only is their pay getting lowered from overpaying to being correct, but it also is you want the money back that you overpaid them. So overpayment does happen. Unfortunately, humans are involved, so there's going to be errors. But the underpaying is really what we're talking about mostly. But again, I don't want to miss overpaying, because you also pay more payroll tax and all that stuff too. So those are mistakes. And they do also go to my first point here, which is driver trust. That's the first thing you lose with a payroll mistake. If you pay a driver an incorrect amount, they already don't trust you as a baseline. Talking about the trucking community, drivers generally don't trust their employers. I don't think this is news to any of you, if you're a driver or if you're an employee. You, as an employer, you need to build that trust. And you do that in tiny little micro increments. Things like getting their pay right, things like keeping your promises, all these things, even on the little things. If you tell them they get a company jacket after a year, having it for them after a year, things like that. That's how you build trust, just doing what you say you're going to do. So the drivers look at their pay stubs. They do. Uh, and it's not usually, for example, it's not the Chicago to Dallas load that gets missed because everybody would know that right away. It's the Dallas to New Orleans and then the New Orleans home or something like that. New Orleans home, they also get correct usually, but it's those little runs or it's the detention they were supposed to get or the unloading or the extra stop or the layover, that kind of stuff. That's often what gets missed. But when you do that, if you don't get it right, the driver catches it right away. And now they feel like they have to scrutinize everything. And so they can't believe anything you're telling them. Oh yeah, I'm going to pay you that detention. They want to know, okay, when exactly am I getting it? And show me that you're paying it. And it's one of the reasons, by the way, for us that we put all the pay stub detail that the client gives us on a pay stub. We'll list the layover. We'll list the detention. We'll list the loads you got paid for if the client sends that to us because we want to help build that trust. But payroll mistakes erode that trust. And you just can't have it. Drivers will leave over it because here's how you know. I said this before. If you go and you talk to any driver, just random driver in the truck stop, you go, hey, tell me about a time that your former trucking company screwed you over. You're going to hear a long story. Now, to that driver, that story is 100% fact. But it might be that they weren't short paid or they weren't cheated out of something, but that the company just made a mistake and they took it as cheating and the driver put it as intent and things like that. It's not for me to know. It's not for me to ever find out, but just know that that can happen. And if you need to really build that driver trust, and payroll mistakes erode that, especially payroll mistakes that could have been prevented. Uh, Again, for our clients, we try to send out pay stubs early. So if there's a mistake, we can fix it before it's even wrong. So the driver gets the money they're supposed to get. But we all know the cost of replacing drivers is thousands of dollars, and it's money we don't want to spend. So if you can keep the drivers, especially the good drivers, you want to make sure that their payroll is right. But that driver trust thing is probably the single biggest thing that happens with a payroll error, especially if it's repeated or if it happens often, because the drivers just have to be able to trust they're going to get paid for the work that they did. You don't pay them in advance, so they're getting paid a week or two later. You really got to make sure you get that right. So that cost is kind of I would call it a soft cost because you don't really know exactly which mistake caused the driver to leave or eroded trust that resulted in some other cost that you have. But the second part we talk about here is compliance penalties. Compliance, when you hear that in trucking, you think DOT. Oh no, this is not a DOT problem. This is an IRS problem. So another error you can make is even if you pay the driver correctly, making sure that you get your deposits into the IRS on time with the right form number and the right form date and all those things. The penalties for not doing this, if you just flake out and just don't do it because you do payroll in house, the penalties can be 50% or more of the tax due, plus interest, plus you actually still have to pay the tax. So it can be a lot of problems. The thing could be too, if you're doing per diem wrong somehow, you're overpaying per diem because you do per diem as a percentage of wage, or you do it as a pennies per mile, but you have too many pennies per mile or too high of a percentage, and you end up overpaying the driver for per diem. If the IRS catches wind of that, we talked about it in the last podcast episode, it becomes an audit thing. And if they catch a wind a little of it, they're gonna catch a lot of it. The average small business in the country, there's all kinds of people that cite this. Yeah, gets a IRS penalty once every 3 years. The average penalty is over $800. So even a small mistake can become a big thing. So you want to really make sure you want to get that covered. Hopefully you do. You didn't get into trucking to pay the IRS. So keep that in mind as well, because it becomes a nuisance. It's like one of those headache things you just got to take care of, but you have to take care of it. Otherwise the IRS will come find you. There's another error or another cost to errors. that we don't always figure out. And that is the time and energy that your office staff, even if it's just you, if you are the office staff, the time and energy you got to spend on fixing it because you came in on Friday morning ready to do invoicing, ready to do a driver interview, ready to do a sales call to try and get direct freight, whatever it is. And now all of a sudden you got a payroll error and you have to fix it now because the driver is really upset and they're like, I will pull this truck over. I am somewhere in Nebraska. Good luck finding your truck. That that's horrible. I mean, if that happens to you, by the way, you have bigger problems than this payroll error. You have a driver that doesn't trust you and you have to fix that. But right now, the thing in front of you right now is the error. So now you've got to stop what you're doing, retrace all your steps, figure out exactly what went wrong, if it did, and if it didn't go wrong, explain to the driver what's going on and convince them that you're correct, and by showing your math. And then you might have to reissue a check. You might have to do another direct deposit. You might have to call your payroll service and run a supplemental payroll and try and get it done that day, which not everybody will do. We do it for our clients for supplemental payrolls, but I know there's other payroll services that don't. So, trying to work that out or figuring out how much to issue them as a com check or something like that to make them happy. But all this time you're spending on fixing this problem is time you could have been doing something much more important to your business. You could have been growing your team. You could have been invoicing. You could have been finding a better load on a broker board. Even that, $100 more on that load from Chicago to Dallas, right? $100. So it's not a number that I'm going to give you that says, every error costs you this much in back office time because every error is different. But I mean, I think a half an hour to an hour is pretty reasonable for having to solve this problem. And it's not a half an hour that you have. So you really, it's why it's so important to not make the errors whenever you can. I don't think anybody's making errors on purpose. So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that, all these errors take up time and it becomes an emergency. The last thing is really talking about compounding over time. And what I mean by that is if you have a systemic problem in your payroll, let's see here. An example would be paying the wrong rate. You meant to pay them this much a mile, you paid them this much a mile. Generally, in that case, it's an overpay. What that cost you a lot of money, you may not get it back. Or paying per diem wrong. As an example, I would say paying per diem additional to the driver's regular rate versus as a substitute for wage, which if you want to do it that way for everybody, but then you lower their rate and it's fine. But if you think that you're taking it out of their wage and giving it back to them as an expense reimbursement, and you find out you weren't taking it out of their wage, which if you use software to do payroll, you're putting it all in your cell. And so that can happen. If the payroll person, whoever that is in your office, if it's you or if it's the other office employee in a small trucking company, if there's a misunderstanding, that can be huge. That can be, and if it's been going on for a long time, that can be tens of thousands of dollars. And if you run a small trucking company, if you own a small trucking company, you don't have tens of thousands of dollars that you can just give away. So it can be a small mistake over a long time. And then you've got to go back to the driver and you got to say, hey, I've been overpaying you. And then they're going to feel like their pay got cut and you're going to have the whole turnover problem again, possibly. But again, building trust helps with a lot of that. So what can we do as small trucking companies to reduce our number of errors or the severity of the errors? 100% self-serving note here. We're a payroll service help trucking companies. That's all we do. So shameless plug there. You know about us. We're cool. Truckingpayroll.com. The other thing you can do is automate. If you do it, say internally or use another payroll provider, automate your calculations as much as you can. Automate your per diem. Automate your garnishments. Automate any of them. If you have multi-state people, we deal with that. Check your totals. You should have, if you're getting it out of your TMS, again, we love Ascend. They have a button right in there that sends it to us, sends the payroll data to us. But if you've got a different TMS, and there's a lot of other really good TMS systems. Is it TMS systems or TMSs? Because I think the S is system. But if you have a report that you're taking out of another software, make sure it has a total for miles, total for wages, total for advances, whatever. And then you can check your totals. If you check your totals, you're going to make sure you're not overpaying unless the overpaying problem is in the TMS. which again, review that, just keep looking at it. You have an idea what your budget is for paying drivers. Brief pause for an important phone call, and now I'm back. The next thing you want to do to make sure you don't have errors is audit your payroll records. Just take a look at them. Look at, okay, I know this driver ran these things and they get this much per mile. They should make this much. Just look, does the math on it? Does the mileage math on it? Things like that. You don't have to check everybody all the time. We got a trucking company to run. We don't have time for that. But just check it sporadically. Pick a different driver each week and just look at it. Another good thing to do is have a clear correction policy that you give to your drivers and they can see it. And actually your office people too, but that's not where the errors are going to be. So in the event of a possible error, this is how we're going to resolve it. If you would like a copy of a policy, hit me up. Ask Mike at truckingpayroll.com and I'll send you one. I don't want to go through the whole thing here. It'd take too long, but basically it's just, here's what's going to happen. You're going to let this person know, this person's going to look into it, and they're going to get back to you within such and such a time. That's really the best way to do it. And finally, if you're making payroll mistakes because you don't want to pay people because you don't have the cash, we got a friend called Payroll Finance. We can send you a link for them. They do short-term financing. They might be able to bail you out, especially if your biggest customer who pays you every Friday all of a sudden didn't pay you this Friday, something like that. So you get set up with them ahead of time in case you need it. That's a good way to go, because you can't just sign up that day when there's kind of like building a fire station the day you have a fire at your house. Doesn't work that way. You got to have the fire station already built. So to recap this, payroll errors cost more than money. They cost drivers, they cost trust, they cost a crazy amount of time, and they cost your reputation. But with the right process, they're very preventable. And when they do happen, they're much more easily fixable. If you're tired of worrying about payroll errors, reach out to us at Superior Trucking Payroll Service. We'll help you get it right the first time. If you just have a question, just reach out to us. Ask Mike at truckingpayroll.com. Comment on the social media where you see this or in the pod. We'd love to do it. Also, if you find this to be helpful, please like it, share it, give it a good review. That helps more people like you, small trucking companies all across the country. Makes it more accessible to them, because all of a sudden we're in the algorithms or whatever it is, right? I don't know all the magic in the background, but if you like it and you give it a good review and you share it, that just helps more people see it. So the next episode next week is going to be about, should you keep your payroll in-house or use a service? There's pluses and minuses to both ways. I'll be the first one to tell you that. We'll go through that all next week. In the meantime, keep on trucking and we'll talk soon.